This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for another wonderful conversation with a musician who maybe you have never heard of. In fact, prior to last week, Gabriella Martinez, I didn't know who you were, but I've been listening to your music, and it's like, wow, have I been under a rock, or are you just not in my area? So I'm so excited that our listeners will get to know you, and we will give them the links to your music. But give us a little bit of background. What got you into this really crazy industry?
Well, I would say that I've been singing since I was really little. I joined choir when I was 8 years old, and I did it all the way up through high school. And I would say the turning point was when I was 12. I did choir in middle school, and my teacher had a competition at the end of the year where we could write our own songs and perform them in front of the class. So I did that, and I ended up winning the first place prize, which was to go record it at a studio. And having that experience of hearing my song come to life for the very first time with instrumentation, that really solidified it for me. I was like, oh, I have to do this as a career. Like, this is my calling. And ever since then, I've been making music.
Oh, wonderful. And luckily you had people around you, at least in the school system, that were saying, hey, you have an opportunity to try this out. So many schools today are getting rid of their arts programs, and students don't have that opportunity. So maybe we can do a little bit of plug for the school systems that you got to find a way to keep the arts in, because it's important, very important. So let's talk about that first song that you wrote. What was it like sitting down and deciding that I'm going to write a song and I know how to do this?
Um, well, the funny thing is, he said that we could work in pairs or groups or by ourselves, and I was like, well, I feel like I should just try this on my own. Because I was always a really shy kid, so I was like, let me just write down some lyrics. And I heard a melody in my head. I heard the first few words, and then I just started writing on just a loose leaf sheet of paper in class. Um, and then somehow it turned into a song.
Now, did you play an instrument? So were you able to put the music to the words, or did you need help with that?
The funny thing is, he said that we could use instruments, but at that time I couldn't play any. So I just kind of heard the music in my head and just did it all without any instruments.
You're the second person that I've heard who does that. And that's my son. My son does not play an instrument, and he will write lyrics, and then he will call his uncle, who's a music producer, and he'll say, okay, this is what it sounds like. And he'll either hum or sing the music to him. And I'll say, so it's a little bit like Rod Stewart, and it's a little bit like this, and put it together. And it's like, how do you do that?
Hmm.
And to him, it's like, oh, it's really easy. You just do it.
Yeah, it's very hard to explain. I can definitely understand that.
So this new piece that you have coming out in October, is it different from your previous music? What is so special about it? Because I understand it's very special.
Well, I have been this whole year I've been working on a project that's heavily 80s inspired. So before that, the music was a little bit more in the alternative pop realm. This year, all of the stuff that I have been making is more in the synth pop, new wave music realm. And so this next song that will be coming out is going to be following that trend. So it's going to be like another 80s inspired track.
So when I was listening to it, I didn't understand that part of it. Now it sort of makes sense, but parts of the music are very haunting. Has anybody ever said that to you before?
I have gotten that a few times. Yeah, I always like to hear it. It's really cool.
I mean, it was like I'm listening, and there's that little bit of vibe of the 80s, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, where is this going? and so unique of a sound. Is that something that you created on your own?
Yeah, I like to draw inspiration from just like my favorite artists, even my favorite movies. Um, and I would definitely say that while I like to have the 80s be my foundation for the sound, I also like to bring in sounds that are kind of more modern, or just something that I think would fit in the song. Even if it doesn't like make sense, I think maybe, I could add like an organ in the song, make it sound a little bit inspired by Phantom of the Opera, things like that. So yeah, I don't know. I kind of just throw together whatever I think will sound cool, and it ends up sounding cool.
Yeah, I love that. So why the 80s? Because I have a feeling you were very, very young in the 80s.
Yes, I unfortunately did not live to experience the 80s. But for some reason, I have always been drawn to it. I just think it's such a unique era. And I like all things about the 80s, the fashion, the even the style of houses I really like, but definitely my favorite part is the music. And I just think it was such an experimental era. It was really when um I would say synthesizers and like electronic music really started taking off, and people just they really let their imagination run wild in that era. And I don't know, I find myself listening to 80s music every day, and it's kind of like comforting to me to listen to it.
It's wonderful. So again, tell us the name of this album and what it's supposed to represent.
So the name of the album is Nephele Act One. And Nephele is a character, kind of the protagonist that I created for the story of the album. And I named her after a Greek goddess. And she represents a lot of things, but what I wanted to focus on was her duality. Because the story that I was aiming to tell with this album is that of a woman who lives in society, and she sort of kind of finds herself crumbling under the pressure of being a woman in a society where men are they kind of have dominance, they are more powerful, and she's kind of coming to terms with her own place in the world. And each song is supposed to represent like a different facet of her personality, a different thought process that she has. The song that I have coming out next month, In the Dead of Night, is supposed to be kind of like a conversation between her and the antagonist, which is a masked man, just like supposed to represent men as a whole. And it's just supposed to be like this feeling of, I understand that I um, have these complex relationships with men. Like, on one hand, I'm attracted to them, but on the other hand, it's like I resent the power they have over me. And that's kind of the story that I wanted to tell with this album.
Well, that is truly what the 1980s was like. Um, I lived through it, so I do remember it. It's interesting that you picked up so much on that, because I don't remember those feelings in the music of the 80s. The music of the 80s was really sort of free, you know. But I will tell you, when I was listening to the song today, it was like, oh my gosh, I've got to listen to it again. And the strange part was I didn't realize I had something else playing in the background the first time, which made it even more confusing, obviously. So when I went back and listened to it the second time, I was like, oh, now I get it. Okay, that other stuff wasn't supposed to be there. Where do you perform most of your music?
I would say most of my music is performed online. I like to do live concerts, usually either on YouTube or TikTok.
Okay. So that's the new way of getting your voice out there.
For sure.
Sort of different because in the 80s, you wouldn't have been doing that, obviously. Who are the people who are listening to this music? Because I would think that, and tell me if I'm wrong, that the Gen Xers and the millennials are probably listening to different music. Am I right or wrong?
Well, I have noticed that definitely I think a lot of the fans that I have that interact with me the most are kind of more Gen Z. But I feel like my music is for anyone who can relate to the messages in my song, anyone who maybe is kind of like that quiet kid like I was, who relates to the message, who feels like they have a lot to say, but is kind of too nervous to say it. Yeah, that's what I make music for.
And that's why I think the arts are so important, because it gives that individual that opportunity to express themselves, whether it's in music, in painting, in writing. My son went through some really tough issues when he was a teenager, and that's when he started writing. And a lot of his music I have not even heard, as he has said, someday I will hear it, but right now it's something that makes him stronger because he was able to get those messages out. So there's a difference between performing online than in front of an audience. Mm-hmm. And I truthfully love home concerts and small venue concerts. Have you been able to get into those?
Yeah, I've done a few. I did a summer showcase last year down in LA. And then I've done open mic night at a local music store. That's about it, like recently, just because I actually deal with like really bad stage fright, and it's kind of hard for me to get in front of an actual audience. But yeah, it's definitely very different than a live stream concert.
So for those of you who heard me say something about home concerts, I know they're more popular on the East Coast and on the West Coast. I've been trying to get them, started here in the Cleveland area a little bit more. But it's a wonderful way to bring in an artist like Gabriella in just a very small, almost intimate relationship. And you get to know her, you get to know her music, and you get to participate in it, which I think is the best part of a home concert. So on October 15th, you're bringing out this song, okay? When does the whole album come out, or is it out already?
Yeah, so October 13th, Friday the 13th is when not only the single will be out, but also the album. I kind of wanted to release the last single with the album, just kind of as like an extra little nugget, since all the other songs had been released already. And then along with that will be the music video.
And of course, it's going to be on Spotify and all the wonderful places where you can get your music. I will have all that in the show notes so that anyone who is listening to this and you say, when can I hear the music? You'll be able to see that is on October 13th, which we're really excited about. What do you have in the works coming up? Can you tell us?
Well, other than the album, right now I have a few collaborations in the works with some producers that have reached out to me to remix some of my songs. So I don't have solid release dates for those yet, but those are definitely in the works. And then I have so many songs in the drafts that I want to release next. But I definitely think I'll take a small break and then get back to it, probably release more singles at the beginning of next year.
Okay. And I'm sure our listeners can follow you on TikTok and on YouTube. So we'll make sure we have those links set up for them. Anything else you want to add to this?
Not that I can think of. I mean, it's just, I am so thankful that you decided to bring me on the show, because it's been a really awesome opportunity to talk with you. I feel like this conversation has just added so much value, and yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, again, as they know at EMPKTPR, that I love doing these. I'm from a family that has been very involved in music, with a brother who's been producing for many, many years. And I love finding people like yourself who I may not have run across you because I'm not in your area, or I didn't get onto your TikTok page and hear you sing. But now I get that opportunity to share it with so many others and say, hey, check her out. It's Gabrielle Martinez. Thank you so very much.
Yes, thank you so much.
We'll talk to you soon. Take care now.
You too. Bye.